I love comparing different versions of games in my videos, and that's something I didn't do a lot of for a variety of Mega Man games. So for today's episode, I wanted to rectify that and answer an interesting question. What is the best and worst way to play every mainline Mega Man game? I decided to go with official releases only because if we were allowing fan-made patches, then ROM hacks would no doubt take the cake for every game that has one, which is almost all of these games. I will mention them for games I think are interesting, but we are going to go through official versions since I think that'll lead to the most interesting discussion. Now, I'm sure there are many people in the audience who will just say the Legacy collections, but those being the most easily accessible versions goes without saying, and I appreciate them all for being that, but I don't think it makes them the best. So let's begin with Classic Mega Man. I will say right now, remakes don't count for the question I'm trying to answer. Mega Man 1, for example, has a remake, Mega Man Powered Up, which came out almost 20 years later. But this game is a total reimagining of the original with different level designs and more stages. But it does also come with Classic Mode, which is a more faithful rendition of the original game. Some might consider this the definitive way to play the original game, but if you aren't into the art style and controls of Powered Up, it might not be for you. Then Mega Man's 1 through 3 got a remaster on the Genesis in a package called the Wily Wars. But it was only 1 through 3 and had little annoyances that were different from the NES games, like the hitboxes, and I thought the NES games were more visually appealing, to be honest, so I'd stick with the 8-bit versions. So that's why I'm just talking about different versions of the original games and not looking for remasters or remakes. But before I even think about it, what's most interesting about Mega Man 1 is the way it ends. Mega Man saves the day and all that, but then the poor guy has to walk all the way home with no breaks. Sounds pretty tiring, I'm sure. And when you have a day like that, you want to go straight to laying down, so to support Mega Man, I decided to partner with Titan to be the sponsor of today's video. Quality sleep is very important to me, as I've always struggled with getting into the REM cycle and have periods where I'd wake up at some point in the night or just only be able to sleep for a few hours and then be up again. And I've also struggled with lower back pain at various times. So the mattresses from Titan solved all my issues in one fell swoop. I got their Titan Core mattress and it was incredibly firm and comfortable, providing great support. And trust me, I tried it the second it aired out by jumping on it and doing my Venom Snake rolls from Metal Gear Solid 5. My previous mattress left me feeling like I needed to toss and turn a lot to feel comfortable, but with the one from Titan, I did not feel like that after the first night, and that continued in the days since. The cat even liked it, once the noise of putting it on the box spring was done with, that is. There's a lot of great things about Titan, like how their mattresses are durability tested by a third party with over 200,000 rolls. And how their product is designed, assembled, and shipped straight from their factory in Arizona with premium materials at a very reasonable rate. It comes with free shipping if you live in the US as well, and is rolled up in the box to make it easy to move. With it, you get a 120-night sleep trial and a limited lifetime warranty. All this with a simple and easy return and exchange system. So, since I know you're interested, you're going to want to mosey over to titanmattress.com/jaysreviews and use code jaysreviews to get 30% off on your order. That code is spelled with no apostrophe and is all one word, capital letter. So that's titanmattress.com/jaysreviews with code jaysreviews. Thanks again to Titan for sponsoring this video. Now, back to your regularly scheduled programming. When doing this, it's wise to pack the original 6 Mega Man games in the NES together, since almost everything I say about one game will be true for all the rest. There have been a lot of ways to play these games, and many of them are just emulations of the NES originals like on the Wii or the Wii U. It's hard to go wrong with a basic version of the OG games, because playing them like this or on original hardware, you'll get the original experience as it was intended, warts and all. Like most every version of Mega Man 3 having slowdown, or Mega Man 2 having a lot of sprite flickering, that sort of thing. Those are more or less baked into the games, but there are some versions that stand out and try to take it to a level further. The original Mega Man Legacy Collection from 2015 is how most people will play these games now. It's not perfect in the way I would like, but it is very good. The emulation is good and the games feel smooth to play, and the upscaling works well and doesn't have uneven pixels or anything like that. If you're someone who likes their NES or SNES games in the skinny 8:7 aspect ratio, this collection doesn't have options for that, but it does have a CPU turbo mode which eliminates any instance of slowdown across the 6 games. Besides that, no other material improvements have been made to these games in the Legacy Collection, but again, it is good. But is it best? Well, that depends on how you feel about the Mega Man Anniversary Collection on PS2, Xbox, and GameCube. This collection was how I first experienced these games, and it comes with many great things. It has a save feature for starters, but the greatest perk of this collection is that you can use the L1 and R1 buttons to quickly swap weapons. The NES controller did not have enough buttons for that, but on this version you can experiment more with the weapons without having to pause the game and go through menus. especially useful in a game like Mega Man 3 where I thought the menus sucked. This is the ideal version of play if you're someone who likes fast-paced gameplay and using a lot of weapons. For me, anytime I've gone back to any of these games in the years since my videos on them, I use the Anniversary Collection on my CRT. But is it perfect? No, I wouldn't say so. The Anniversary Collection struggles with sound. Music doesn't sound great, and sound effects like the charge shot are way louder than they're supposed to be, and other sound effects are very compressed. It's not a great auditory experience, even with better gameplay features. But that's the great thing. The versions of Mega Mans 1 through 6 used in this collection are re-releases of the PS1 versions of the first 6 Mega Man games, which are Japan exclusives. But if you do play them on an emulator, it has all the perks from the Anniversary Collection, like switching weapons and the Navi mode where you get additional guidance if you're bad at Mega Man games, and remixed music. These PS1 versions don't have perfect sound, but they don't have nearly the amount of issues the PS2 era versions have. And since it's classic Mega Man, you don't really need to read the text at any point to really grasp the gameplay. So I'm gonna say the all-around best gameplay experience for Mega Mans 1 through 6 are the PS1 Complete Works versions. But I feel like all the major console ports of these games are at least good. So if you stick with Legacy for ease of access, I can't fault you for that. But now for the worst version. I thought this would be easy because Capcom put Mega Mans 1 through 6 on mobile devices in 2018 and the result was not very good. The games ran at a really low FPS, and that, in my mind, made it a shoo-in for the worst versions. However, let's be fair, there are other games with the name Mega Man 1, 2, and 3. For example, Mega Man 1 and 3 on DOS were technically licensed by Capcom, so they are official versions. However, these are just completely different games with the same name. Shitty games, but different games nonetheless, so they don't count. Same goes for Mega Man 2 on the Tiger Electronic handheld. I don't even know how to begin to describe this kind of game. It's not Mega Man 2, and it's not good, and it's barely even a game. So I was gonna say the recent mobile ports take the cake. But then I did a little more digging and found out that the first 6 Mega Man games were ported to Java phones in the early 2000s in Japan. These are actually based on the real original games, not just using their names. So they run at a lower FPS and the physics look pretty off. It is good by Java standards since most Java phone games are primitive by nature, but still I'm gonna call Java the worst way to play Mega Man 1 through 6 and the PS1 versions the technical best. So next up is Mega Man 7, the only numbered classic Mega Man game on the Super Nintendo. There are far fewer versions of this game to go over compared to the NES games, so let's get into it. I remember finding the Legacy Collection 2 versions of 7 through 10 all kind of mediocre, but revisiting them for this video, I was pleasantly surprised by 7 and 8. I haven't played this collection much in the last several years since I have other ways I like to play these games, but for Mega Man 7, the Legacy Collection is a good emulation of the original, with one caveat. And I'm sure longtime viewers of mine probably know what psychotic thing I'm about to bring up. The Legacy Collection version of Mega Man 7 is a good choice if you play it with the option to preserve the pixel scaling accurately. If you do the full screen option, it fails the pixel test. What do I mean? Well, if any doctor wanted to know if I have OCD, I can merely say I start every Mega Man emulation with one simple test. You see, a screen resolution needs to be upscaled evenly for all the pixels to be evenly sized. For example, the Super Nintendo has a screen resolution of 256 by 224. On screen right now is Mega Man 7 being emulated on a 4K screen. You'll notice it doesn't reach the top and bottom of the screen, and that is because the SNES resolution doesn't evenly fill a 4K screen, because 224 doesn't evenly go into 2160, which is the vertical resolution of 4K. So this is as close as it gets while preserving the pixels. If you simply stretch the screen vertically like the full screen option does in the Legacy Collection, the pixels will be changing size with every step you take. And when you see it, you can't unsee it as it creates a shimmering effect as the screen scrolls. So on the emulator I use, this is as close as you can get to full screen while keeping things even. But this Legacy Collection Perfect Pixel option also passes the pixel test, unlike the full screen option. And I'd say that makes it a good version of the game. The Anniversary Collection version would be good, but it has one key issue. They couldn't properly emulate the fiery ending of Mega Man 7 in time, so they just scrapped it entirely. It doesn't make the gameplay worse, but it is the only version of 7 that doesn't have the ending presented as intended. And it also has sound issues like the previous games. So I'm actually going to say that the Anniversary Collection is the worst Mega Man 7, and that if you play on original hardware or Legacy, Mega Man 7 is roughly equal. Though if you want to dip into unofficial ways of playing the game in English, there are tiny cutscenes that weren't in the English version that a fan-made ROM hack brought back, and it had a faithful script to the Japanese original as well. But I don't think these things are so important that I'd say you need to play them over the official English release of 7. So Original and Legacy are tied for Mega Man 7's best, and Anniversary is worst. Mega Man 8 is similar to 7 in that there aren't a lot of revisions of this game to speak of, but it also had different versions at launch, which is a considerable difference. The game was originally released on PS1 and Saturn, and the Anniversary and Legacy collections were using the PS1 edition. Everything I said about the Legacy Collection version of 7 goes for 8. The integer scale option looks great and the game plays well, but the full screen option looks shit. The Anniversary Collection once again struggles with sound, this time because certain sound effects are way louder than they're supposed to be. The health bar is also darker than it's meant to be as well. But otherwise, I don't think it played poorly. I've heard this version of 8 has more input lag, but I loaded up Frostman stage just to see what happened and got through it just fine. And that's the most input sensitive section of the entire game. Nothing here is game ruining, but it is still the least enjoyable play experience if you have sound on, so I'll say that it's the worst for 8. And then the PS1 disc and Legacy Collection are equal. But then comes the Saturn version, which absolutely loses when it comes to accessibility, but again, that's not what I'm here to answer. For years, fans have complained that Capcom keeps using the PS1 version of Mega Man 8 because it's less complete than the Saturn version, which features 2 exclusive boss fights and arguably better music. I say arguably because that's very subjective, but those boss fights are in no version other than Saturn. It is small enough to where I wouldn't say you're missing anything by not playing it, but it is enough to where I can say it's the most complete rendition of the game. And now we can quickly go over Mega Man and Bass, which came out between 8 and 9. This game has 2 versions, SNES and GBA. The SNES version provides a lot more visibility as the Game Boy Advance version zooms in on the gameplay to make sure you can see it on the small screen. That makes it a lot more frustrating to play. But it is also the only official English version of the game we have, as the original was Japanese only, and for some reason the second Legacy Collection left it out, when I think it would have been a nice addition to pad the roster from 4 games to 5. But setting Mega Man and Bass up with an English translation patch on an emulator is easy work, though. Mega Man 9 and 10 are a different story. I will say I appreciate the Legacy Collection too for being the first time these games were made available on a physical disc, and I also will give it credit for containing the DLC for both games, but the conversion was just not that good. I don't really know if these games were emulated or ported. Ported would make much more sense, but then I don't know why the pixel scaling got so fucked up since these games released on HD consoles when they first came out. Full screen, I didn't really notice much of the shimmering issue because the 8-bit graphics are almost too simple to have that kind of detail, but the inconsistent sizing in the health bar is the giveaway. And then on the small screen option, it somehow looks even worse. Then you have the fact that these games were designed to be 4x3 in their original consoles, but then are the skinny 8x7 look here. If you prefer that, you prefer that. If you don't, you don't. But in Mega Man 9, this conversion makes the border look incredibly fucked up and unfinished, if you're someone who likes using those, which I am not, but if you are, it looks terrible with Mega Man 9. I just think these versions are ugly, plain and simple, but then the situation of finding the ideal way to play them gets interesting when you look back at the original 7th gen versions of the games. The PS3 and Xbox 360 versions would seem like the ideal, but then both versions have this bilinear filtering on the games that make them really blurry. The Legacy Collection attempted to fix that, but miraculously, the Wii versions of Mega Man 9 and 10 don't have that filter on at all. My good pal Exo Paradigm Gamer graciously provided me with footage of the original Wii versions to confirm my memory correct. I tried just looking it up, but most footage of Mega Man 9 and 10 on Wii are from the late 2000s and early 2010s when footage capture quality was too shit to really tell. And more recent footage has the possibility of being emulated on Dolphin. In this original footage, you can see it's not blurry, but you do have to remember that the Wii was a 480p console, and these games ran at 480i on them. But the even pixels and lack of filter is what gave the Wii version the upper hand in my mind. Then, when playing on an emulator like Dolphin, you can get the games looking really sharp. So I think the best way to play 9 and 10 is Wii via Dolphin, and the worst way is the Legacy Collection. And to wrap up the classic series, there's Mega Man 11. New games don't really have much port variance anymore, so there isn't as much to say. I think Mega Man 11 is best on PC. You can play it in 4K that way, and the weakest is the Switch version because it's the lowest resolution. I'm using this as my frame of reference because when it comes to modern games, that's pretty much the only major difference between consoles. The Switch is portable, but that doesn't really mean a whole lot to me since I don't play games portably anymore. But now we can move on to the X series, and there's actually quite a lot to say about every X game. The first Mega Man X had many ports and re-releases and even got a remake. This remake was a lot closer to the original than Mega Man 1's, but I still regard it as its own game, of which there's only one version of it. So we're just talking about the SNES game and its future editions instead. This is one of my favorite games ever made, so you can't really go wrong with just doing it on OG hardware, but its best edition, if you ask me, is on the PlayStation 2. In 2006, we got the Mega Man X collection, and this was not an emulation. Mega Man X1 through X6 were natively ported to the PlayStation 2 with enhancements to the flow of the game. Since the PS2 is miles more powerful than the SNES, all instances of slowdown are gone. Like the minecarts in Armored Armadillo stage, it's completely smooth now. And it has a save feature with 3 save slots. For my money, this is absolutely the best version of this game. It has no drawbacks to speak of. But then, when searching for the worst version of Mega Man X, it really came down to 2 options. First, the old DOS PC port. Looking at it, it doesn't look too bad, just not as good or fluid as any other version. But truly, the only pick for worst version of Mega Man X1 is the iOS version. I've actually played this, and it plays as clunkily as it looks. It is still X1, so it's not like it makes the level design bad or the gameplay loop unfun, but it just runs like trash and isn't fun to play with these touchscreen controls. Don't love it, don't even like it, so that gets my vote for the worst version of the game. And then there's Mega Man X2, which has far fewer renditions than the first game and especially the third one. Because the Super Nintendo version of X2 is basically the only one that exists, so the differences are going to seem minuscule in comparison to 1 and 3. But anyway, I would still say the PS2 version is easily the best X2 because this game has a lot of action that chugged the game on the original hardware, and the PS2 edition has none. The only thing about X2 on PS2 I don't like is that the title screen is messed up because the charging sound effect that plays when X is shown in the intro is supposed to stop when the music begins. But in this collection, it does not. But when you're actually playing the game, it is the best version. So then what's the worst X2? That will be the one in the X Legacy Collection. I feel far less kind towards the X Legacy Collection than I do the classic LCs, and that's because of 2 words: input lag. If the classic collections had this issue, I didn't notice, but the input lag in the X Legacy Collection has been tested and verified. All versions of XLC have more frames of input lag than any prior version, which means there'll be more frames between you pressing a button and the character doing the action. In a fast-paced action platformer like Mega Man X, you want that lag to be pretty low. And as someone who has more hours in these X games than any human probably should, I never liked X1 through X6 in the Legacy Collection because it feels so sluggish to me. Which is a shame because I love the package of the X Legacy Collection. I love the artwork, the menus, the music, the gallery, all that stuff. But I just hate playing the games on it because I'll fail or die due to latency in ways I wouldn't in the other versions. And then the X Legacy Collection fails the pixel test for X1 through X6. I've seen mods that fix the pixel scaling with an interpolation effect that creates in-between pixels to fill the space properly, but I couldn't find it for the video because the last time I used it was like 2020. And furthermore, even with good pixels, I still wouldn't want to play this because that means dealing with this input lag, so XLC is my vote for the worst X2. Now, like I said, X3 is very unique because there's a plethora of versions. In terms of versions I'd consider unique, it was on SNES, PlayStation, Saturn, Windows 95, PlayStation 2/GameCube, and then the X Legacy Collection. So who is best? Well, I will say that in terms of the gameplay experience, the PS2 version still wins because of the gameplay fixes that came as a result of porting the game instead of emulating it. But there is a massive caveat with it. The version of X3 on PS2 and GameCube is based on the PS1 version of X3, not the SNES version. This one completely replaced the entire soundtrack with CD quality audio. Some sound great, others sound a lot worse, but music is subjective, like I said. So if you're a stickler about having the original SNES soundtrack, then I'd say the best way to play it is just on an original SNES cartridge or just emulating that version. Obviously, XLC is the SNES version, but it has too many issues to be considered. The PS1 version of X3 is fine, but the PS2 port is better in every way with faster load screens and no slowdown. So what's the worst version of X3, you ask? Well, the Saturn version was torn to shreds by critics, but I thought it played fine enough. Just has a weird looking border on it due to the resolution difference between the Saturn and the SNES. And overall, it just wasn't very impressive for a next-gen port of a previous-gen game, so it's fine, but nothing special. As is the Windows 95 version, which I do own and have played. Honestly, of all these options, I still think X3 is worst on XLC. Obviously, Windows 95 requires a compatible PC or some kind of setup to get running, but once you do, the lag is again a killer in the new version that makes me say it's worse. Now we're up to the PS1 X games, and X4 starts off with a decent amount of versions. To get it out of the way, I think the best version is playing it on PS2 once again. Like I said for X3, the PS1 games in this collection all come with faster load times, giving them the edge over their PS1 originals. When I conceived this video, I thought the competition for worst X4 was between the XLC and the Saturn version, the former having input lag and the latter having no transparency effects like the PS1 version did. But the Saturn version has other benefits like a heatwave effect in Magma Dragoon's level. Otherwise, it's the exact same game. But when looking into it, X4 had a PC port in Japan, which I saw on the Abandonware website. So is that the worst? Well, I can't say that because it turns out that in 2011, X4 got a mobile phone port of which no footage exists online. But we do know what the music sounds like, and we know that it turns the FMVs into pictures with dialogue like the cutscenes for X5 and X6, which honestly for some might be an improvement. But going off of how X1 ended up on mobile, which I have seen and played, I'd imagine that X4, an even more complicated game, wouldn't fare so great. So that's my pick for probable worst X4. And then I'm going to bunch X5 and X6 together because there isn't much to say that's different between them. I think the best version of these two games is on PS2 for all the reasons I've said, with the special mention of Dark Dizzy's stage in X5. This level had a slowdown effect in the original, but it was actually intentional as it was timed with the background changing. But still, it doesn't slow down on PS2, so it does feel better to play than the original. Both games were released on PC back in the 2000s, but only X5 hit the West. X6's was Asia exclusive. I'd pick these as the worst versions of both titles. One, because they don't run on Windows 10 and up, and while there's probably a workaround for that, and they look like they play fine, X5 has this weird looking sprite smoothing thing going on, and I don't care for that, and then X6 has really high-pitched sound in the video I found. So I think XLC is actually a safer bet for playing X5 and X6 than these old PC ports were. But hey, I've given XLC a lot of crap today, but that's just for X1 through X6. It did also come with X7 and X8, and here's where XLC shines. This collection does have higher input lag for these games compared to the originals on PS2, but the benefits outweigh the cons. X7 is one of the worst games from the current millennium, but in its original PS2 form it was even worse because the game had these lengthy loading screens that could last like 30 seconds or more. XLC ported X7 and X8 to the new consoles, so issues like that are gone. X7 now loads at a reasonable pace, which makes XLC the best version of X7 by default. It does have other pacing problems still, and the game is not good at all, but this is the best way to play it. It also comes with a Japanese version of X7, which has higher damage values for the player characters, making it slightly easier than the English version. X8 wasn't as troubled on PS2 as X7, but it does still benefit from being ported over, like having faster loads and HD graphics. So this is also the best version of X8. And the worst version of X7 is again the originals on PC. X7's was only released in Korea, and it looks bad. Like, the characters have no shading and outline around them, and it looked cursed as hell. X8's is actually fine. It's an old PC version of X8, so it would need some work to run on modern hardware, but it does exist. It doesn't look or run poorly, so that would mean the worst X8 is the one on PS2, with worse visuals and some weird oddities, like how playing the game in 480p makes the game slightly off-center in a weird way, but all three are basically the same, so it's kinda splitting hairs to find a truly worst one, but that covers it for the X series. The Zero, ZX, Battle Network, and Star Force games can actually be all more or less bunched together. That's because for each one, there are only two main versions, the originals and the Legacy collections. The Zero series did get a collection on the DS with enhanced music and an easy mode where you played all four games sequentially, but I think Capcom really got their act together with Legacy collections starting with Zero and ZX, because they claimed they were using the source code for it and not emulating the games. As a result, there's no noticeable input lag. I also thought the pixel scaling was pretty good here for the Zero games. For the ZX games, if I wanted the perfect pixels, I used to have to play with the game in windowed mode on PC, but I could get it working. But thankfully, I don't have to do that anymore, because a modder had released mods for ZLC that makes all the Zero and ZX games have perfectly integer-scaled pixels on full screen and borderless windowed mode. So in terms of look and performance, I think ZLC clears, but the new Save Assist is the best part. These games are hard, and Save Assist is a really good compromise if you ask me. The OG Zero Collection's easy mode was too easy, as it was a baby mode. This Save Assist is the original game, but with more checkpoints you can respawn at infinitely. That does change the difficulty balancing, of course, but I think it makes the Zero and especially ZX games more comfortable. Getting a game over in ZX was devastating since you need to backtrack a lot to make progress. But if you don't want the games to be easier, you can turn it off and play the vanilla game. So ZLC is the best of all worlds, if you ask me. And that would make the originals the worst by default. Similar thoughts carry over to the Battle Network and Star Force games. Now, all of these games had different versions to play, like the Pokemon games, and which is the best of those different versions is not something I can really answer, since I haven't played these games much beneath the surface level footage gathering, but the Legacy collections have the same benefit of using the source code that ZLC had, and like ZLC, they still come with convenience and difficulty adjustment features. So for these, I once again say the LCs are the best way to go and the originals are weaker, but for these games specifically, don't quote me on that, I'm not an expert on the subject. And finally, there's the Mega Man Legends series, which has no Legacy collection, so it'll be a battle to find out who is best and worst. The PS1 version is the original, and so is the bar all others are compared to. I was gonna say it was the best one compared to its original PC release and the N64 version, but PC isn't actually so bad. It is an older PC game, so it's not perfect when running today, but a few months ago, a user called NC Kuro Raiden did a repackage of the game that lets you play it on modern PCs, and it actually works. And the Unfinished Business mod brings in the audio quality from the PS1 version. So I'm willing to say this is the best version of Legends 1. Since the PC version is abandonware at this point, I think it's perfectly ethical to play. The N64 version also has been my pick for the worst one, since it has a lower draw distance and awful audio quality.
I'm sorry, Mega Man. I had some engine problems, and...
It's okay, Roll. But I'm glad you showed up when you did.
I'm sorry, Mega Man. I had some engine problems, and...
It's okay, Roll. But I'm glad you showed up when you did.
But this version is getting a recompilation on PC, which would make it the version with the highest frame rate now, but I still think the N64 version has too many cons baked in, so I pick it for worst and PC for the best. And last, but not least, is Mega Man Legends 2. The PSP version of Legends 2 makes material improvements like the items in the shop costing less and the underwater dungeon not running at 2 FPS. But it was Japanese exclusive and only had one analog stick to work with, so you can't use the dual stick controls of the PS1 version. But the modder Ace Diaz did make a ROM hack to fix these issues in the PS1 version. The PC version of Legends 2 is likely the same as the original, but it was only in Asia and doesn't have a repack or anything, so it's not very accessible, and it's not in English. So I'll just say the PS1 version is to date the best way to play Legends 2, and the others may make improvements but aren't accessible if you only speak English, since these are games where reading them would be very important. But yeah, that's the best and worst version of all the main Mega Man games. Thought that would be a neat experiment for a video. If you thought it was cool, feel free to say so in the comments. If not, and you hated it, it's a free planet, so you can also say that too. But in the meantime, I'll close by saying what I always do. You've seen everything. Go outside.